Добрый вечер.
Good afternoon, and I hope everybody can listen to what I say. And if you have difficulty in hearing, you can sit closer. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon again, and I'm very grateful to everybody present because after the entire day of working at the Congress, people might be tired, but you still joined us, and this is very pleasant fact. I'm Yaroslava Zabello. I will moderate this session, and I here represent the AK&M information agency, which does research in M&A for a number of years. And I'm just worried with the noise. Can you hear me well? Good. And to start with, I'd like to say what the M&A market looks like in Russia and provide some statistics to it. Then we'll speak in detail about certain aspects. Last year, 2013, was quite successful at the M&A market because it reached a record for its history of observation, 118 billion US dollars. And naturally, it happened at the expense of one of the biggest deal when Rosneft took over 10K BP for $55 billion. But even without it, the market grew by 23% compared to 2012, and the number of deals didn't grow significantly, only by 5%, and according to our statistics, was 541 transactions. And here we registered only those M&A deals without minority deals, and it's still 541 transactions. And now the growth in the market happens through the average increase in value of Russian companies, and current average deal in this market is $57 million. It's quite high price of Russian companies demonstrated. And what another interesting part, characteristic of the market is that is observed by us that we cannot be rejoiced about this growth in the market because it is not accompanied by an increase in the output of our industries, and virtually it was 0.3%. It is there, and leads to certain risk, danger, that the risk is the market is overheated, and the interest shifts from financial to telecom industries. Therefore, apart from a number of industries like chemical and industry and oil and gas, the market is not demonstrating very good tendencies, and we hope that the shift in focus will move again to a real or producing sector. And oil and gas segment of the market dominated through the 10K BP purchase, but still we had increase in the number of transactions by 30% in this sector, and therefore the focus on the production of mineral resources, it is not that we need to favor, because it's a very narrow specialization. But we are happy about the way the chemical industry is doing, agriculture, information technologies, and I will not dwell at length about it, but this information is available at our site. Just one thing to add about the tendencies last year, which we identified, is concentration of the rocket M&A market. Not just concentration, but it is a certain kind of self-inclusion in the market. When both Russian company is located in Russia and they they buy the relevant company, and this happens in 90% of deals. The 3/4 of all deals happen inside the Russian market, and this concentration is growing there. And compared to 2012, we have 75% inside the Russian market. In 2013, it was 39%. Therefore, this kind of isolation of the market probably is not a very good sign. Moreover, the volume of our deals abroad shrinked. In 2013, it dropped 2 times year to year, and compared to those 12 billion deals in 2012, and foreign companies also were not frequently buying, and these activities dropped 12% jointly with the Russian assets. So in conclusion, I can say that the Russian companies today do not reduce the activity in abroad, but they've become very careful in their spendings, and foreigners reduce the number of deals and the size of them. In January, we saw certain activity, but we need to follow it and to see how foreign investors will feel in the Russian M&A market. And the last point, we need to recognize that the main player in the Russian M&A market is our state. In 2013, the companies controlled directly by the state or indirectly, which can actually control it through other companies. So these companies completed 7% of deals, not that too much, but the amount of these deals ran to, I don't see it here, but around 73%. So it means that state-owned companies buy, not frequently, but they buy a lot. And TNK BP was bought by Rosneft, and this is the example of it. And the activity of state-owned companies is becoming less year on year, but still it is the major player which dictates the rules of the game. And the rest of the statistics you can look at our site, AK&M, and there we publish and update the information monthly, along with our reviews. And as we have described the market, generally it looks quite positive, and M&A is actually growing. And the beginning of this year was also quite positive, and January normally is very bad season for us, and half of the months normally in Russia we have New Year vacations, and then but this year it was different and it was the best January starting 2010. We have never expected this increase, and probably the ruble is devaluating. Therefore, the companies would like to insure themselves and do the ruble deals, and they strive to complete the deals in the beginning of the year. And still, the market is doing well. And after this short review, let's listen to our esteemed experts about technicalities of M&A. We'll speak about concrete things and speak about the interaction of different investors and the way they structure their deals, and to what extent the risk of hostile takeovers is looming over the Russian market. And Pavel Gagarin is first to speak. He is head of the board of Gradient Alpha Group. Pavel?
Good afternoon. I think it is a bit unfair to start with my presentation. I was last to come into the hall. So There it goes. Here is the presentation stick. As far as M&A technologies are concerned, I will not go into these technicalities. Should you wish to find out more about it, please ask me a direct question of this session. And since I'm the first speaker at this session, I would like to invite you all to come on the 27th of March to Ararat Hayat. There will be a conference which is called East plus West equals Invest, and this conference will be about protection of assets, investment, and everything else. There will be interesting speakers there, including the deputy head of the central bank. We will discuss various practices used in M&A. So if you Google this East plus West equals Invest, you will get all the details about this event, and I will be consulting people on specific issues related to hostile takeovers. This is the most important thing to mention here, and everything else will be quite generic simply because it is quite difficult to speak about technicalities with an unfamiliar audience. So, but you're welcome to come to this conference, or we can discuss these issues off the record and off this session. We'll be very glad to see you at this conference, and you will be glad that you visited it as well. So, touching upon the most important factor which impacts the state of Russian business, if we talk about defense of assets and defense from takeovers. So this factor is opacity of business. It's intransparency. So we defend ourselves from one risk, but at the same time we expose our different sides. So if business is not transparent, then it is very vulnerable to legal risks and tax risks, which can be, this vulnerability can be exploited by police or by tax authorities. So this company can see that its accounts will be frozen, especially given the factor of the current political situation, and we see that the attitude in Europe and the United States to Russian finance is changing, and it is getting increasingly difficult to ensure finance flows abroad. And on the other side, our tax authorities are building up tax pressure, and they are administrating and claiming fines for unpaid taxes in a more strict way, and now they have to provide more tax revenues to the budget to plug the gap which was caused by the Olympic Games costs. So we face that Russian budget is developing several holes, and the way to plug these holes will be to increase the tax pressure. And professional raiders will want to exploit vulnerability of business. But apart from these administrative things and highly intellectual technologies, there are other technologies used. They are more related to providing credits. So one credit can buy the debt of a creditor, and this bank can be used by raiders, and there can be quite difficult schemes specified in the credit contract. There will be interest charged on top of interest, or there will be a reservation related to certain turnover on the account, and then the company may end up being taken over by the bank, or it might be forced to introduce somebody else's people into its board. And these people will facilitate the changing of financial flows. I will not be giving you exact details, but I'll just give you some brief figures and facts about mergers and acquisitions or unfriendly takeovers. An interesting case, we've been through an interesting case recently. So, some time ago, the Russian government allocated a piece of land to two companies. So just imagine that. There is one street is here and another street is there, and the piece of land is integral. So one company has got the right to exploit the piece of land at a particular address. Another one got the right to exploit the piece of land at a different address. But effectively, it was the same piece of land. So one organization have not been providing proper reporting for 10 years, and another company has built a marketing center, trading center there. The raiders got interested in this project, and the raiders have taken over the company which also had rights for this piece of land. And finally, after using certain corruption technologies and administrative options, the raiders made sure that they got the legal right to use the land. Well, in fact, that ruling should never be there, simply because they have the right to exploit the land, whereas the building is operated by a different company. So they ended up getting 50%, let's say, ransom payment from the owners of the building. Or there are other things related to heritage. And just recently we went through the case which had nothing to do with raiders, but there was a company which had a general manager, and this general manager had all contacts, was exercising operational control over the company. And also there were company owners who were pocketing the profit, but who was not running the company. At a certain point in time, the general manager thought that there is no point in giving all this profit. He registered a new company and transferred all his business to his new company. So it was a very carefully planned action, and legally there was no way to come up with a claim. And this is a live case that happened quite recently. So we can see that these people used their business reputation, they used their business connections, and legal technicalities provided them with an opportunity to produce a paperwork that defended them from all the claims of previous owners of the company. So these are the cases with which you should get yourself defended from and shielded from. And there is quite a number of cases like this happen around. So for 4 years of our operation, we went through like 3 cases of this kind. And raiders have to keep living in the times of the crisis, and they still have to, let's say, feed themselves. But that would be the end of my presentation. But if you are interested, you can ask me some questions. So I've got one question. Can you please elaborate on the thing that you just barely touched upon? This is the takeover with the help of the bank. So, how is it done? You mean who is to be blamed for this at all? There are just 830 Russian banks operating in the market, and around 50 banks. There are about 50 banks which are used by raiders as an instrument for these takeovers. So there are creditors who are not acting in good faith, and there are debtors who are not acting in good faith. And if you take creditors and you take the credit contract that they want you to sign, you would see that this is a completely draconian contract, which is binding you to a specific option. And these options would be to give your entire business or part of your business to somebody else as the result of a claim. There are contract terms, there are some miscellaneous items, there are force majeure paragraphs, and if you read these contracts attentively, and even if you eliminate all those hidden traps, you might still end up with leaving a loophole in the contract, which will expose you to very significant legal risk. Like, for example, if you do not maintain a certain revenue turnover in your account, you will be liable to a penalty. For example, untimely interest paid in untimely fashion is charged. Another interest is charged on top of that. And a quarter of financial managers of different companies do not understand this concept when interest is charged on top of the interest. And these people have serious MBAs. So all these things, we call them legal bombs. They're all planted into these contracts with banks who are not acting in good faith. So these legal bombs are planted in pledge contracts, in credit contracts. So you should watch out for those people who contact you when you're in trouble, who say, we want to help you. Well, we in fact want to help our bank. So this is what we will do. We'll give you a person who will run your finances, and you will be able to spin off some of your assets and cover the claim of the bank, and you will be fine. Plus to that, our court system sometimes is not functioning properly. And also, those banks who are liable to do these things, they're very well covered from the legal perspective. This is talking generally about it, without giving you any details. Thank you very much. So you mean those cases when raiders look for an opportunity, they don't look for a specific company. We keep debating this raiders issue since 2003, and I think that the term raiding is not actually applicable in all these cases. In some cases, the assets have been taken over by banks simply because when the companies were taking huge loans and then found themselves unable to repay these loans when they matured and when the economic crisis started. But anyway, there were cases when a bank has aggressively tried to establish its control over the pledged assets. But our observations tell us that it was a hot issue in 2010, but once central banks started to scrutinize Russian banks, they found it quite difficult to do these operations because the banks had to spin off all their non-core assets into investment funds, so it has become difficult for them. But now the crisis is increasing, and this story can become the story of our days again. And Pavel, we recently noticed that there is a case like there is a contract. So formally it's not an M&A. Let's say you have a smelter which is nearly bankrupt, and the owner is not selling this smelter. It is only talking that they want to sell it. However, the owner of this smelter gives the right to administer the troubled smelter to a state company. So that happens quite frequently now. Why do you think this is happening, and why do you think this smelter, this troubled smelter, is not bought for some low price? Well, there are options. There are several options. Several options. A company might have losses. A loss is in fact an asset, because using this loss, a company can avoid certain taxes in a law-abiding fashion, or nearly law-abiding. And I call it nearly law-abiding those actions in which it is difficult to prove that the company had malicious intentions. Another option is that the company would probably want to loot the smelter and sell it off in pieces. And a comment of about this central bank's attempt to clean up banks' balance sheets. These things has two sides of it. It has become quite difficult now to refinance your loans. Central bank is currently stopping all these refinancing attempts, and it sanctions those banks which are involved in such refinancing. So on one hand, it is good that central bank is clearing up bank sector, but on the other hand, they strip a lot of companies from the opportunity to maintain their financial position. So we have to keep these two things in mind. Has anybody got a question about what we have just discussed? So if there are no questions, then I suggest that we should now talk about changes in our legislation, those changes which are more acute and more relevant to M&A issues, because it is not only about hostile takeovers, but it is also applicable to quite regular M&As. This legislation changes quite frequently, and I think there is a point in highlighting the main changes and the main proposed changes to this legislation. And I'm very glad to give this floor to Alexey Kuzmishin, who will be able to give us a comprehensive answer to this question. Alexey Kuzmishin is a partner in a legal company, BEITEN and BURKHARDT, and he is involved in M&A consulting. Alexey.
Thanks, Yaroslava. And first of all, we are all awaiting latest changes in the civil code, the last package which concerns corporative relations. And this package is the last piece, and the rest of them have been already put into effect. Only corporate issues remain outstanding, and there were some extensive debates in the government and in the business community. We talked about this affiliation issues. We even have to address Prime Minister Medvedev to sort out certain things, because on the one hand, we have minorities which strive to make corporations more transparent and get the more approval mechanism of approval of deals. But the second tendency is that this rules which new rules to introduce have expand the number of issues which require a board's decision, and then these general meetings decisions, and they have to approve at these meetings almost thousands of deals if it goes like this. Therefore, there are some opinions that corporations has won this battle, and some proposals in the civil code will be made ineffective, and minorities they have lost this battle, and probably it will not increase the investment effectiveness of attractiveness of Russia. And I don't think to dwell on these issues at length, but still, one of the main ideas of entire reform in the civil code was to improve business climate and attract investments, simplification of deals and transactions, and approximating to international standards. And I believe that we have partially achieved this goal, and we will see the court practices, and especially with this the Institute of Guarantees provided, and the confirmation and verification of these guarantees, which the parties need to produce, and once violated, some other party can waive the contract and ask for reimbursement. And we will see how it goes, and to what extent courts, with the latest improvements of our system of arbitration, we'll see how they will protect the size of the deal, and it will become obvious quite soon. But the current situation is such that businessmen, Russian and foreign, quite common, they find it more convenient for themselves to sign the complete deals abroad. And once we have this deal signed in Russia, then Russian parties use the Russian law in these cases, but the colleagues need to know that quite often the deals are sometimes done on purpose, with some international element included, to make all the transaction completed abroad. It will be easier, it will cause less problems, and I was a witness myself, and I was surprised that in the Netherlands, when signing a deal for $100,000 or euros, a notary office who does it and takes money escrow and releases the escrow money, they take several thousand euros for such services, and the parties find it quite convenient to do it there. It's easy, it's understandable, and they know the procedures of regulating their relations there, and the parties know how the court will actually support them. And our Dutch colleagues recently came and told us about the changes in the Dutch law on limited liability companies, and they said everything is permitted now. If you want to set up a limited liability company without chartered capital, you are welcome to do it, and other things become more simple. Therefore, the authors of the law, those who wrote the law 50 years ago, and we learn from it, but then they would say that we destroyed the pillars, and the business community will say yes, because the conditions have changed, and especially when we don't talk about huge investments, just certain investment in the real sector, we quite often deal with limited liability companies, and we know how complicated it becomes to resolve any issue in Russia and go to the Russian notary office here. Here, every notary officer has its own ideas about it, and it takes quite long to coordinate the deals. If the state authorities are involved, then it becomes, especially with strategic industries, there are no term limits there. Therefore, the parties may actually enter the deal, but the government commission can postpone it indefinitely, its approval, and these factors are not accepted by foreign investors, and when we speak about Russian investors, they still want to leave the Russian jurisdiction to the best of their capacity, and they prefer deals signed abroad. And our state is aware of it, and there are some attempts to correct the situation. One of them is the canceling the notification procedure for M&A deals. We don't need to notify Federal Anti-Monopoly Agency, which makes life easier for smaller companies. But on the other hand, some deals inside the groups still need to be coordinated and notified with the state authorities, and this we need to also calculate the assets on both sides, and in no jurisdiction in the world you don't need to do it, and foreign investors don't even see the point of doing this kind of coordinations. And another negative factor here is the fourth anti-monopoly package, which is in the pipeline, and there everything which concerns the coordination of joint activities. We are not talking only on M&A deals, but when we join efforts to develop something, to create a new venture or a new, this federal anti-monopoly agency wants to control it and to monitor it, and you have to coordinate with them this joint activities with this federal anti-monopoly officers, and say setting up a company. In our legal understanding, this is just a mutual activity contract which is needed, and if we want to set up a new organization, God forbid a large company is involved with significant assets, then the parties need to go into the Federal Anti-Monopoly Agency, and now this need may be actually repealed, and there will be no formal need to do it. So on the one hand, we see that there is a wish and even the progress of in our government to simplify life of our investors and to improve the situation to a certain extent, and even to improve its rating and doing business scale. On the other hand, we see these elements when certain grounds become mandatory for some deals, and our jurisdiction becomes not the most favorable for a particular type of deals. We hope that improvements need to be introduced there. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to take them. Alexey, many thanks. Dear colleagues, do you have questions? No questions. Therefore, as a moderator, I will ask questions. Alexey, can you just, my remark is that I agree with you that on the one hand, according to our observations, completing a deal becomes more transparent business, especially when more and more company endorse this IFRS accounting, and when we don't have this kind of complicated structures when one company was owned by a sister company, and then the sister company owns a third party, and then which owns the first company, and we don't have these ugly forms of ownership anymore. But still, we see that the deals are completed in foreign jurisdictions, and the rules on stock go from one shore company to another offshore company, or the owners of this offshore companies change. And from what we observed, some useful initiatives of our regulators lead to even more complication in signing deals, especially when buying a bank, because there is a reasonable idea of central bank to check better new shareholders in this creditors and don't allow those who were involved in the intentional bankruptcy cases. When we had several permits ruined, especially this Urin holding, when the banks bought other banks and there was a pyramid of those banks with inflated assets, and then the central bank introduced more rigid control over those bank shareholders. And previously, central bank would control the deals with more than 20% of shares involved, and then once this package of those stocks would be fragmented to 15.99%, and then there was not 5 but 10 owners, who each of whom has 9.99% of shares, and the intention to make the deals easier actually leads to more complication, and the regulators lose control. And I wonder what is the fate of the latest government's initiatives, which we observe for the last several months. Talking about withdrawal of Russian assets from offshores, and the demand of identifying real owners of companies, and so that we need to deal with the legal persons, and not some Virgin Island companies. And the idea of knowing the final owners of certain companies, they have grounds, and those companies which will not disclose the final beneficiaries will have more tax burden. And what, Alexey, what is your take on the prospects of this particular draft legislation, and whether the company finally can achieve its goal to take our Russian companies away from offshore areas? And Yaroslava, many thanks. That's a very topical issue to discuss. Certainly, these bills sooner or later will be put into effect, and we have already specific considerations about it. And at our site, which evaluates regulating impact, already has an information about the Ministry of Law bill prepared, and we believe that quite soon, that may even next week, and now we have the information that before March 22 the discussions will continue. And but Mr. Shatalov has already stated that this bill has been already prepared. It includes certain sanctions to those companies which will not disclose certain information. And generally, we believe that we follow the trend which is common internationally. There is a time to scatter tax and the time to collect tax, and the pendulum moved to the side that we need to collect tax finally, and this initiative is in line with fighting the offshore activities, and they're not actually aimed at fighting offshores. It's just a matter of collecting tax which are evaded, and we would like to introduce this tax residency notion. And in Cyprus, they warn that the If you want a cyber company to be established, the bulk of this, the directors should be Cypriots, and all the meetings should be here and not in Moscow. And if we have a cyber company or any other company, the directors sit in Moscow and sign everything here in Moscow, then it's a Russian resident and it shall pay tax here. And the same situation happens with regard to sources or taxes on other assets which are withdrawn from the Russian Federation. If you take any agreement on avoiding double taxation, it's stated there, yes, the rate will be less than standard, but the mandatory condition is that the person who gets the final beneficiary of it, who gets the final payment, he needs to be a resident of another state. If he is a Russian citizen, so this doesn't work. And in principle, there is nothing extraordinary which doesn't exist in international practice. However, with regard to other situations, we know that the state-owned companies declared that they will close their offshore companies and or bring them back to Russia where it is possible, and whether they will give up Russian entrepreneurs and businessmen give up the idea of registering offshores. I don't know. Maybe they will evaluate it on a case-to-case basis, and the benefits they will get, or economic reasons which may overweigh the transfer of business here to Russia. And I believe that the issue of convenience for the business and transparency or transparency or opacity of it, it's not the main factors for some players. And some of them believe that they may move to Russia, but for the others, it is probably not the decisive factor to change everything and then immediately change its structure and transfer assets into Russia.
So, am I right in saying that you are making a forecast about the near future? So the owners of the company will have to make a choice whether they want to keep their property in a structured way, and they want to keep all the pros of offshore ownership. So the contras of that will be the increased tax burden. So they will either save money in taxes, but then they will have to follow Russian regulations and laws when they sign their deals, or they have to choose the other option. Am I right in saying this? Exactly so. It is happening now, and it costs you to set up a company abroad. It is easier and it is more transparent to set up a company in Russia. When you operate abroad, you have to face an extra cost. So this is legal cost, auditing cost, translation cost, business trip cost. However, business people still choose this option because the contras of this option are outweighed by the pros of confidentiality, of more flexibility, an ability to transfer assets in a quicker way. It provides you with an option to structure your life and build up your plans. So business is voting in favor of this. So when we start debating another law, an extra law, business people are very good in assessing of impact of certain things. So they will sit down and calculate this impact. State-owned companies, they don't face this choice simply because all those deals which they would like to have abroad, they must have them here in Russia. So it's not optional for them. They will transfer as much of their business as possible to here. However, private companies and private individuals might be up to thinking of some ways to circumvent these regulations and to protect their assets, or probably they will be happy with the idea that sometimes somebody will come after them. But this will only happen if there is informational exchange with tax authorities from different countries. Now we are talking about joining the Convention of Organization of Economic Development in Europe, and so we are joining this tax convention. And the Netherlands, also before, they claimed that they have special regulation which help them avoid double taxation, and they have protocols signed with Luxembourg, Cyprus, and Liechtenstein. So even the Netherlands are now saying that they are ready to sign the new version of the legislation about avoiding double taxation. And that legislation would also stipulate the informational exchange between different countries about taxes. But given the current situation and current complications, these organizations might not be interested in further developing of this cooperation, because we are the beneficiaries of this. They are not quite so much interested in it. They would like to get some tax information from us, but this problem is not so topical for them. Not as much topical as it is for us. It is important for our tax authorities to get information about our bank accounts abroad. So I'm not sure to what extent will these foreign tax authorities want to meet us halfway, and whether they would like to exchange information with us. Some will have to. Some small jurisdictions who want to remain in this market, they will have to do it, but cooperation of others is questionable. Thank you. Well, I agree with what you just said about the current situation. It is important to mention that we are part of M&A market, and until today we still don't have results of February. However, February results are not that representative, because we will see the impact of the current political situation on M&A market only in April. And our concern is that the number of deals will significantly reduce, and given the fact that Russian deals are structured through European companies, then it is a point of concern for many Russian companies that sanctions will follow, and these sanctions will deliver an impact on their business. So they might be up to delaying certain M&A deals, especially those which are structured through European companies, because there is a risk of having assets frozen. So that will have a negative impact on the market, so the so-called Crimea effect. But we will see this effect only later in the second quarter of this year. And getting back to the current situation, then I would like to say that you have given us very valuable data about the legislation on mergers and acquisitions. I would like to ask Oleg Osipenko, who is the head of Rinkom-Gamma consulting company. So I would like to ask him about the existing practices in M&A area. So what happens during the deal? What happens after the deal is struck? What happens between the shareholders? Thank you. I believe we are a little bit tired, so at your permission, I will make our discussion more interactive. Unlike my colleagues sitting at this table, I do not believe that opacity of our corporations increases the risk for our corporations. There is different grade of opacity or intransparency, and if you talk about big companies, it is important, and this risk has to be kept in mind, and we have to support the efforts of our president, who believes that opacity of this business is reducing the attractiveness of these companies from investment point of view. However, there is a paradox. Like Pavel Gagarin was mentioning, that many holding companies are set up in shadow. So this business becomes intransparent and opaque for the owners of these companies. And that factor creates lots of ironic things. And Pavel has mentioned several categories of raiders takeovers, and I was astonished to hear about many innovation. I'm using this word quite constantly. Innovational means used by raiders. But I will tell you about one technology which, unfortunately, well, we see that this thing is happening more and more often, and it relates to changes which were made to the registration procedure of company and the changes being made to arbitrage regulations. Now we know that there were several changes made to the regulation, including the criminal law. But it has polarized our corporate segment. So there is a segment of the market which is related to bank takeovers, and it can be quite interesting to corporate lawyers. However, there is another technology which is called trading the controlling share against against compromising materials. So a company will use every possible means to investigate the deals and to get information from minority shareholders. And my colleagues know that there is a letter. In 2011, there was a letter sent by the Supreme Arbitrage Court. And if we take the essence of the letter, we can say that the company shall disclose everything which is on its books. Well, apart from those cases in which this information can be used maliciously. Unfortunately, this desire to disclose details have just fueled the flame. Every information which is being disclosed can become the basis for delivering pressure upon a company, and it can be used for the sake of taking over, or it can be used as a basis for blackmailing. So you collect compromising materials about a company, then you provide these materials to the company that you want to take over, and you give them time to think. So you either give me your business, or I'll send all these materials to the police or tax authorities. It is quite difficult to come up with any counter technology to this. But the best policy would be not to break the laws. It's a very fine statement, but you need, dear business managers, you need to audit your companies. You need to take a look on your company from a side. You need to involve consultants who have the latest information about hostile takeovers, and you need to use these people to cast a look from a side on your company and assess your tax system, assess your ownership structure and everything else. In some cases, there is a point in in making the company more opaque rather than transparent. Unfortunately, not a lot of companies want their accounts and structures to be audited. The companies come to us where nothing can be changed, when they are done. Or sometimes the companies make these audits when They have to, from the legal terms. So nobody is doing these health checks to protect themselves from hostile takeovers. This might happen because the companies do not have enough trust in auditors. But anyway, aggressors are still getting the information they want. But still, it is good to make these health checks from time to time. I reiterate the fact that these things happen in our life. And another way of corporate conflicts is about green mail. This is about minority shareholders who are very well prepared from the legal perspective. These minority shareholders start to abuse their rights. So they're asking for excessive information. They start providing bad publicity to the company in mass media. They start filing numerous complaints to courts, and they start to file all sorts of complaints. So they create an aura of a trouble around the company. So and then these people would ask for a piece of your business, or would at least ask for something. They will ask for a suitcase, for a briefcase of money, or something else. So there is an irony in trying to become transparent. I don't want to scare away foreign investors and international investors. And these things that I mentioned, they do not constitute a well-established rule. But the investors should know about the rules working in our market. Unlike hostile takeovers, the green mail does not affect laws or does not affect anything else. And we are saying that there is a point in using the practice of the United States when they find these green mailers, or they use the French practice where there is big penalty for the green mails. Unfortunately, we don't have this working here. On the 4th of March, we have restructured the Russian Financial Market Service. Now there are 9 various departments operating there. So probably this issue will be properly attended to. And Elvira Nabiulina, or one of her departments, who is working with negative market practices, will do something to resolve this, do something about it. Because our meetings with various heads of these departments show that the heads of these departments do not have a clear look and do not have a clear vision of this problem. On the 4th of February, we saw that corporate conduct code has been approved by the government. This code combines the number of rules which the companies should follow to lure investors into the business. There should be another code of conduct, like investors' code of conduct, which would protect companies from malicious investors. And now this issue is under debate, and this code does exist in the United Kingdom, for example. And drawing a line under what I've just said, this green mailing technology is becoming more widespread, and the only counteraction would be your own action, which will be focused on building up the defense system. It will be focused on prompt response to this, the cases of abusing power by minority shareholders. And the third number of factors, unfortunately, we're seeing more and more internal corporate conflicts. This is when the co-owners quarrel with each other. Why do they quarrel with each other? That's a good question. They are probably tired of all this nervous business, or probably this happens because the true beneficiaries of all these companies do not properly structure relationship between themselves. And we tell our colleagues that you need to have some sort of a gentleman agreement so that you have an idea of what you are planning to do in certain situations. And Pavel was right in saying that, unfortunately, all those scandals happen when the key beneficiary dies or leaves the company. Then all those who have claims about the heritage of the company, they start this scandal. So it can get quite complicated, and there are different interests involved into all these stories. But following the Russian law, these companies can sign shareholder agreements, or they can sign framework agreements, even informal framework agreements. But they need to understand that they've got to be prepared for these issues. So these internal corporate scandals happen in line with specific scenarios. This is when one partner is using the knowledge of his business against the other partner. This information is leaked to green mailers or raiders, and they use this information to their benefit. But that will be the end of my presentation. And please do not take my point of view as the negative assessment of our investment climate. It is all about keeping yourself safe. If you take precaution measures, then it helps you in future when you're in trouble. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. And I think it is not about negative issues. It is about the saying which says, forewarned means forearmed. And do you have any questions? Good afternoon. My name is Ekaterina. I'm from Financial Consulting Agency. A question about creating laws and regulations about raiders. How do you estimate the feasibility of introducing the concept of hostile takeover into our legislation? And can we introduce a criminal law responsibility for falsification of documents, or falsification of minutes of shareholders' meetings? Do you believe that it is feasible to create the measure of responsibility for these things? Well, it's an excellent question, and I'm all for these measures, but at this particular moment, I'm against it, no matter how strange it looks like. There is a big difference between creating a law and the practice of using this law. And if we introduce this concept, we will create mayhem, and we will create uncertainty for those people who work in the field. So one of these laws works, but there are certain difficulties. Once there was a complaint to use the clause of the law 188.5, when a minority shareholder wanted penalties being levied on the majority shareholder who just committed a technical mistake. You are right, we need to think about doing it. So we need to think about ways how we can do it. And in 2008, there was an attempt to criminalize the green mailing activity. And so our colleagues tried to amend the paragraph of number 201 with certain amendments. But when the Federal Council saw these amendments, they decided against introducing these changes, because that could scare the minority shareholders away. So Our logic is quite simple, and the State Duma people had very simple logic. There is no need to overcomplicate something. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Good afternoon. I'm Dmitry Metlaev, and I'm from Trans Technology company. My question will be about intellectual property. There are cases when intellectual property, like trademarks, are used as an instrument or as a tool for hostile takeovers. Yes, it happens. Can you please elaborate on this? I would say that we have a couple of projects underway. And if we talk about categorization of those technologies, I would categorize this trademarks activity as greenmailing, because a lot of our companies are not very well taught what to do with trademarks. And Pavel has given a very good example about creating a very clean case against the company who was acting in good faith. Why did it happen? It happened because people did not pay due attention to things which required attention. In my case, an act of raiding is in fact a hostile takeover. So that this is when it's not only about the titles of ownership. It is about operational control of the company as well. So I have never seen these things in my life, but that creates certain conflicts. You're right. You're right. I'd like to add something to this. Normally, we work with international and foreign investors, and one might think that foreign investors are particularly cautious about certain things. But as far as intellectual property is concerned, foreign investors sometimes act like kids. They believe that if they registered trademark somewhere, that regulation is in effect in Russia, and in many cases, what they have registered elsewhere does not have any legal effect here in Russia, and they have to extend this certificate, but they have missed the payment deadline, and so they cannot recover their right. So this problem is there, not only for our market, but for other markets as well. And this presents an opportunity for somebody to create a parallel business. And anyway, all production now all production is in China. So all we do here is labeling Chinese products. So you can label them in the way you like.
Can I comment on something which we spoke about previously, about offshores? And we as a consultants see quite clear tendency to replace offshores with other jurisdictions with softer climate or not clearly described processes of tax responsibility. And there are a lot of countries with such regime: Ireland, Denmark, the Netherlands. There are a number of companies which can have the company registered in Austria, and you might think it is has quite rigid legislation, but they still have some practice of tax agreement. And a company with $500 million and still pay 100,000 tax for several years, and there are many examples well known about. In Hong Kong, in Southeast Asia, talking about American finance system, American banks quite eager to open accounts for Puerto Rico companies which are not classic offshores. And emails, city emails, and it's also not. In Europe, you can open such an account. In the US, you can do it, and FATH program is quite strongly present in Europe, but still, this tendency is there, and this getting away from offshore structures is a gradual process. Nobody can do it overnight, and I don't think that businesses would like to extend this chains of deals, but look for jurisdictions with a softer tax climates, which we can call even this tax haven, and you can even not register a company for tax control and still have an account and work with it there. And many banks in Europe, in Switzerland, and Monaco, and Germany, and other European countries stop de facto opening accounts for offshore companies, and they strive to limit for the companies which open their accounts to after 2010 to close these accounts, especially if beneficiaries are related to Russia or Russian business. The program of looking for beneficiaries is active everywhere in Europe. And this is what I would like to comment on. And the second is Oleg discussed, Oleg Osipenko touched upon the situation related to quasi-legal approaches in grabbing business without strict violations. And we know several cases when people paid all taxes and the business was transparent, and then there was a loophole in our legislation which cannot actually assess the technologies and the company has, and the patent law cannot protect it, and business connections, the value of the brand, and having a similar looking brand approved, and these are the loopholes which affect the development of business in Russia. But as I have been working on legislative initiatives, I know that even if we work fast, we're still lagging behind the current situation, and the feedback will come in 2-3 years after the law is approved, and then we will have other developments in life, and it will be an endless process. Therefore, our company transited from participating in drafting laws to consulting on particular situations. Okay, I would like to ask whether anybody has any comments or statements. If not, then I need to say that the time flies by, and definitely nobody would believe that in 90 minutes we could exhaust the examination of issue of M&A, and we just address several quite topical points, and the major conclusion we can come to as the result of this session is the awareness that there are no companies available which sooner or later at its point will encounter the transition of a title or buying an ownership. Some minority package can be bought or sold, or the company will be taken over, or public stock may or floating may happen, and even a small company can, a barbershop, sooner or later may come to the need to sell this company expanded. Therefore, knowledge of M&A and a very careful approach to these deals is very important. Besides, because apart from this audit, which helps you to keep the company in a good shape, and you need to assess your company from the market viewpoint and know its current value. And besides, even if company enters a deal and the owners are involved, it's very important to have some safe guarding of certain of hostile takeover, and we know the examples in this information technology field. A majority owner sold it, his share has left certain package of it, and the new majority shareholder starts a case against the former owner and accusing him of damaging the company or withdrawal of assets, and then suing on some serious grounds. And these situations can occur. And M&A should be actually examined carefully, because this knowledge can be useful one day. You need to look at your company at the market standpoint, and you need to know what will happen if the decision or the owner of the company decides to enter a deal, that it should be profitable to both company and its owner and the employees of it, which I wish to all of you. And I would like to thank you for coming and sharing with us. Thank you.